Before we dive into this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and drop a comment sharing what you would have done in the rancher's boots. Now let's begin. A black rancher named Elijah had carved out a quiet life for himself in the rugged lands of New Mexico. The sun beat down hard, the winds were relentless, and the soil didn't give anything for free, just like life had taught him. He owned his own land, tended his own cattle, and trusted no one but his horse. After losing his brother during the war, Elijah had no family left, only the ghosts of his past and the whistle of prairie winds to keep him company. He was respected by some, feared by many, and avoided by most. Not because he was dangerous, but because he had seen too much, survived too much, and carried the kind of silence that made others uneasy. That silence was about to be broken in a way he never expected. It was just after sunset when Elijah spotted movement on the edge of his land. He reached for his rifle, cautious but calm. A figure stumbled forward, clearly injured and dehydrated. His uniform was torn, dust-covered, and bloodied, a Union soldier by the looks of it. Elijah didn't trust uniforms. He had seen too many men use them to justify cruelty. But something in the soldier's eyes wasn't aggression, it was desperation. Elijah approached slowly, the rifle still in hand, and asked what the hell he was doing on his land. The soldier collapsed before he could answer, face down in the dirt. Elijah stood there for a moment, wrestling with instinct. He should have turned away. But instead, he knelt beside the man, checked his pulse, and dragged him inside the ranch house. The soldier didn't wake up until the next morning. When he did, Elijah was already outside tending to the animals. The man groaned, trying to sit up, but his shoulder wound protested sharply. Elijah returned with a bowl of stew and set it down without a word. "You got a name?" Elijah asked flatly. The soldier coughed, then whispered, "Name's Harris, Private Harris." Elijah stared at him for a moment. That name stirred something in the back of his mind, something he couldn't place. But he shoved the feeling down. The man was in bad shape and needed rest, not interrogation. For the next few days, Elijah tended to him quietly, never asking more than necessary, but always watching. Harris was grateful but guarded. He explained that he had deserted his post after witnessing an atrocity committed by his commanding officer, something he couldn't stomach. Elijah didn't comment. He had no love for the war or the men who ran it. Still, something about Harris didn't sit right. Elijah found himself waking up in the middle of the night, listening for movement. He didn't trust easily, and even a half-dead soldier wasn't immune to suspicion. Harris, on the other hand, seemed eager to prove himself. He offered to help with chores, despite his injury, and did so without complaint. Days passed. Trust started to build. Until one evening, while cleaning out the old barn, Elijah stumbled upon something that shattered it completely. Tucked inside Harris's pack was a locket. Elijah picked it up, recognizing it instantly. It belonged to his brother Isaiah, the only family he ever had. His hands trembled as he opened it, revealing the photo of the two brothers taken before the war. It was old, faded, but unmistakably theirs. Elijah stormed into the cabin, rage boiling in his chest. Harris froze as Elijah slammed the locket on the table. "Where did you get this?" Elijah demanded. Harris went pale. His eyes darted to the locket, then to Elijah's face. "I found it," he muttered, "on a body, after a skirmish." Elijah's voice was low, dangerous. "Was it you who pulled the trigger?" Harris's silence was answer enough. Elijah nearly reached for his rifle, but something in Harris's eyes stopped him. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't guilt. It was pain. "I didn't know who he was," Harris said slowly. "It was chaos. I fired at shadows. I didn't know." Elijah's fists clenched. Every muscle in his body screamed for justice, for revenge. But as he stood there, heart racing, he remembered something his brother used to say, The war don't care about names, only uniforms. Harris looked broken, not just from the wound, but from the weight of what he'd done. Elijah turned and walked out the door. The days that followed were a storm of silence. Elijah barely spoke. Harris tried to explain, tried to apologize, but Elijah wouldn't hear it. The land grew heavier. Even the cattle seemed uneasy. Elijah threw himself into work, trying to outrun the storm inside his chest. But no matter how far he rode or how hard he worked, he couldn't erase the memory of that locket. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Harris approached with trembling hands. "You saved me," he said, "when you could have let me die. I don't know how to repay that." Elijah didn't respond. He stared at the horizon, where shadows danced on the ridgeline. "You can't," he finally said. The next morning, Harris was gone. His bed was empty, his things packed, and the barn door left open. But on the table, Elijah found a letter. In it, Harris confessed everything. He had carried the guilt for months, not knowing the man he killed was someone's brother, let alone the man who'd later save his life. He promised to never forget Elijah's mercy and vowed to use his second chance to make amends, even if it meant spending the rest of his days doing so. Elijah sat for hours reading that letter, over and over. He didn't cry. He never cried. But for the first time in years, something inside him softened. Weeks passed. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. The wind still howled, the cattle still grazed, and the porch still creaked under Elijah's boots. But something had changed. He wasn't alone anymore. Not really. The pain of the past still lived in him, but it no longer controlled him. He'd stared hatred in the face and chosen forgiveness. Not for Harris, but for himself. One evening, he rode out to the edge of his land, where the soil was richest, and planted the locket beneath a sycamore tree. "Rest easy, Isaiah," he whispered. "Your death won't be in vain." The sycamore grew stronger with each season. Locals who passed through often asked about it, and Elijah would simply say, "That tree holds a story only the wind knows." They respected that. Stories like his didn't need to be shouted. They lived in glances, in silences, in the weight of every sunrise. Elijah remained on his ranch, older, wiser, and forever changed by a single choice. Because sometimes, the hardest thing a man can do isn't pull the trigger, it's choose to forgive the one who did. And before you go, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories from the Old West. Stories that history forgot, but the land remembers. The rancher stared into the firelight, the heat of the flames unable to burn away the frost that had taken hold inside his chest. As the soldiers slept in the barn, unaware of the storm brewing just yards away, the rancher turned over every detail of that day, the day his brother died. The description had matched too well. The drawl, the insignia, the story about a retreat gone wrong. It wasn't just a coincidence. His heart wrestled between fury and confusion. Why had fate brought this man here? Why now? He rose to his feet slowly, gripping the frame of the porch like it might hold him back from doing something he'd regret. By sunrise, the soldier was already tending the horses. He greeted the rancher with a half-smile, unaware of the tension behind his eyes. "You saved my life," he said plainly, brushing hay from his sleeve. "Ain't many would have done that." The rancher nodded once, keeping his voice low. "Name's Elijah," he finally said. "Elijah Carter." The soldier froze. His eyes blinked hard, recognition or guilt, flashing across his face. It was as if a ghost had spoken. "You related to Jeremiah Carter?" Elijah's silence was all the answer needed. The air thickened instantly, like a noose tightening. The soldier's face drained of color. "I didn't know his name. I swear to God." Elijah's voice was gravel. "You killed him." The words were heavy, undeniable. "In Cold Creek, 4 years ago. He never made it home." The soldier stumbled back, hands shaking. It was chaos. I didn't. He came out of the trees. We were ordered to fire on anything that moved. Elijah stepped forward. And you didn't hesitate. Silence again. The wind pushed through the fields like judgment. Neither man moved, two figures frozen in time by a single, irreversible choice made in the dust of war. Elijah wanted to hate him. He wanted to pull the rifle from the wall and end the story right there. But something in the soldier's eyes made him stop. Regret. Real, searing regret. I've carried that moment every day since, the soldier muttered, voice breaking. Didn't even know his name. Just another shadow in the trees. But he screamed when he fell. That scream never left me. Elijah clenched his jaw, torn between grief and clarity. For so long he'd needed someone to blame. Now, standing here, blame had a face, and it wasn't what he expected. That night, Elijah returned to the fire. He stared at the flames like they might show him the right thing to do. The soldier didn't run. He stayed in the barn, didn't ask for mercy, didn't make excuses. Just waited. Elijah thought of Jeremiah, his laughter, his stubbornness, the way he always believed in people. What would he have done? Shot the man? Turned him in? Or offered a second chance? The fire cracked, sending a single spark into the sky. Maybe that was the sign he needed. Maybe forgiveness wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the hardest kind of strength. The next morning, Elijah saddled 2 horses. The soldier walked out, surprised. You kicking me out? He asked. Elijah shook his head. You're gonna work. Pay your debt with sweat. The soldier nodded, understanding it for what it was, mercy wrapped in calluses. Day after day, they worked side by side. Fences got mended, cattle fed, land cleared. But words were few. Trust doesn't return overnight. Still, slowly, a kind of rhythm formed. One man haunted by what he did, another by what he lost. Both trapped in a past neither could change, but maybe, just maybe, could outgrow. Word spread slowly through the region. Folks were wary. The rancher who took in a soldier, a deserter, no less. And the killer of his own kin? Some called Elijah mad. Others called him brave. But he didn't listen to either. He just worked the land and let time do its job. The soldier, whose name was Samuel, never complained. He bore the weight of every stare, every whisper, and never asked for pity. He was there to work, to serve. And slowly, the land began to soften under their shared labor, just as Elijah's heart did too. One evening, after a long day branding cattle, Samuel spoke first. If it had been the other way around, if you'd been the one who killed my brother, I don't know if I could do what you're doing. Elijah looked at him, eyes tired but not cold. You don't know what you can forgive, he said, until you've been forced to carry hate for too long. That sentence lingered between them like smoke. Samuel nodded slowly, understanding that redemption wasn't a gift, it was a choice. And Elijah had chosen something few men ever could, the weight of mercy. But just as healing seemed possible, another knock came at the door. This time it was lawmen. Armed. Stern. We're looking for a deserter, the sheriff said, eyes locking on Samuel. Elijah stood in the doorway, unmoving. Ain't no deserter here, he said firmly. The sheriff's hand hovered near his holster. You sure about that? Elijah nodded. Man works my land, earns his keep. Whatever he did before, that debt's being paid now. The standoff was brief but tense. Eventually, the law rode off. But the message was clear. Peace would always be temporary. The past has long legs. That night, Samuel sat alone in the barn. Elijah walked in, handed him a tin cup of coffee. You can run, he said, or you can stay. But if you stay, we fight this together. Samuel looked up, tears in his eyes. I'm tired of running. Elijah nodded. Then it's settled. Two men, from opposite sides of a broken past, forged something few could understand, brotherhood not of blood, but of choice. As the crickets chirped and stars blanketed the night, both men knew their story wasn't over. But for the first time, it wasn't a story of vengeance, it was one of rebuilding. The fire crackled between them, but the silence now felt heavier than the desert wind. The soldier lowered his head, finally speaking. I never knew his name. Just that he was tall, fast, brave. Each word stabbed like a knife, and Elijah's hands trembled. He had a scar right here, the soldier added, touching his jawline. Elijah stood up slowly, eyes burning. That detail, the scar, was undeniable. His brother Nathan had that very same mark, earned during a barn accident when they were boys. His voice came out raw. That was my brother. The soldier looked up, his face pale. I didn't know. Elijah turned his back, trying to contain the storm rising inside him. Every part of him wanted revenge, justice, something to even the scales. But he also saw the fear in the soldier's eyes. Not the fear of dying, but the fear of regret. Elijah walked into the night alone, the stars watching in silence. He reached the fence post where he and Nathan used to race horses, the place where echoes of laughter and brotherhood still lingered. He clenched his fists, questioning everything. Could he forgive the man who unknowingly ended his brother's life? Would revenge bring peace, or just more pain? The desert wind didn't answer, but it carried a whisper, his brother's voice, soft, saying, "Let it go." Elijah returned at dawn, his face calmer, but colder too. The soldier was awake, seated against the wall, unsure of what the rancher would do. Elijah threw him a canteen and said, "Finish your work, then leave." It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't vengeance either. It was something in between, a decision only a broken heart could understand. Elijah didn't sleep that night. He rode out into the desert before sunrise, the metal clutched in his hand. He found the tree under which Nathan was buried, marked by a small wooden cross and a pair of weathered boots. Kneeling beside it, he placed the metal in the dirt. He didn't know Nate. He didn't mean to, Elijah whispered. Tears mixed with dust on his cheeks. But I needed to know who did it. And now I do. A hawk cried above, and the wind swept through the canyon like a sigh. Elijah stood and tipped his hat. I'll carry it now, for both of us. He mounted his horse and rode back to the ranch, not as a man of vengeance, but as a man carrying the weight of truth. Months passed. The ranch flourished again, though quieter than before. Elijah didn't speak much, but the neighbors noticed a change. He no longer scared people off. He offered a nod at the general store, a wave to passing riders. The pain hadn't vanished, but something inside had shifted. One morning, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside, a single sentence, I named my son Nathan. Elijah sat in silence, rereading the line. He didn't smile, but he closed his eyes and nodded. Somewhere out there, the man who had unknowingly taken a life was trying to honor it. And Elijah, in his own way, was learning to live again. Not forget. Never forget. But live. The land around the ranch became a sanctuary, not a fortress. Elijah planted trees near the fence line, built a bench by the creek where Nathan used to fish. He spoke to school kids when they came by, telling them stories of the West, but never of the soldier. That story he kept inside. Some scars weren't meant to be shown. But one day, he found a small carved horse on his porch, the kind his brother used to make. No note, no tracks. Just the carving. He held it in his palm, heart pounding. Maybe the soldier had passed by again. Or maybe it was someone else who understood. Either way, it meant the story still mattered, and always would. As time marched on, Elijah became a quiet legend. Not feared, but respected. His story traveled with the wind, told by travelers and passed down through campfire tales. They said he had a ghost in his eyes and a heart made of barbed wire. But those who really knew him said he was a man who chose mercy over wrath. And that's what made him stronger. Kids grew up hearing about the black rancher who forgave the man who took everything from him. Some believed it, some didn't. Elijah never confirmed or denied it. He just kept tending his land, keeping his brother's memory alive in the only way he knew, by living fully, quietly, and with dignity. One late summer evening, an old rider stopped by. Gray-bearded, slow-moving, but familiar. Elijah recognized him instantly. It was a childhood friend, now aged by war and time. They sat on the porch, whiskey between them, sharing silence more than words. "You still carrying that pain?" the old friend asked. Elijah nodded. "But it doesn't carry me anymore." The friend raised his glass. "To Nathan." Elijah raised his own. "To forgiveness." The two clinked glasses, and for a moment, the past felt lighter. The stars came out one by one, and the land rested in peace, as did the heart of the man who had once been feared by all. The ranch never grew into a town, and Elijah never married. But he wasn't alone. Travelers came and went, and his porch always had space for stories. He became a living myth, not because of guns or grit, but because of grace. He lived not to erase the past, but to carry it with honor. When he finally passed, the town rang the church bell 13 times, one for each year Nathan had lived on the ranch, and one for Elijah himself. They buried him beside his brother, under the same tree, where the desert sun now sets with reverence. And the wind still whispers their names. If you made it this far, partner, you just rode through a story of grief, truth, and redemption. Elijah's tale isn't just about the Old West, it's about how a man can face the worst and still choose what's right. So if you believe stories like this deserve to live on, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share this with someone who needs a powerful story today. Out here in the wild winds of time, the legends only survive if we keep them alive. See you on the next trail.